to do that. And I know at Microsoft, we really put a lot of energy into trying to find ways to connect those pockets of expertise that are now broadly distributed and networks, not just sort of top down. That's point one. Point two, I think this idea of reputation being the new certification, right? That the reputation you build from a following based on what you know and how prepared you are to help other people gain knowledge, that's a really powerful force that's at work in a lot of these systems. And third point would be that people are prepared to pay for that value. And it may not be in traditional ways by plonking down, $20,000 to go to college for a year, but in new ways, exchanging value in very, very creative ways when you can find value from somebody who can help you either in real time or develop your skills. So it's a really interesting set of ideas emerging that may well influence the future of learning.
Yeah, it's a fascinating space. I mean, if I were to give you another example, and I'll connect this to another area, I think, as we continue to evolve as practitioners, right, data science continues to have this, I think, potentially profound effect on the way in which we understand how our investments are engaging our end users. And it's, a lot of folks have said this, but data is, and across various platforms, the data exhaust that exists there is underutilized. And there's only more of this that's going to be created. And we as corporate learning professionals need to recognize this and understand what it means for leverage in the context of Web 3.0, which is, that Web 3.0 is all about ubiquitous connectivity, intelligent web, open data portability, open technology. And, we haven't yet realized, or at least figured out, how can we leverage learning data as a gold mine for understanding engagement? So I would ask that folks start to aggregate this now and think about the ecosystem. If I were to make the fitness analogy, if relying on your LMS solely for data is like counting the workouts you only do at the gym. I mean, there's a lot of other things that are happening outside of your activity at a gym that you need to be aware of, that people are doing. And I think some very easy examples to see where this is happening already is look at Office 365, right, as an example, where aggregation of learning and knowledge is happening in the context of day-to-day work. I think as more adoption of that across companies is happening, you'll start to see the activities that are taking place inside of applications like Teams, or even things inside of the documents that people are sharing and using. There's more applications in that suite that I think are ripe for having a better understanding of, okay, what is the utilization or the graph, as Microsoft would call it, look like across the company? How can we connect that to the intersection points of those networks? And what does that tell us about those individuals that are good at it? Is there any correlation there with, their potential for roles, leadership, et cetera, et cetera? I think it's one of those things where, if you think back to, Chris, you're familiar with the book? I'm sure you are. Moneyball, right? The detailed, unorthodox, data-driven management approach to how to manage an American baseball team, the Oakland A's. And I think the use of data has the opportunity for us to, if we combine that with the holistic reimagination of how data can be used in places like talent acquisition, talent management, learning, and our learning data becomes another, several data points that help tell us, okay, how instead of just relying on instinct and experience to help shape our recommendations within our organizations, how can we better use the holistic set of learning data and think about new and different metrics that better inform how well our people are intersecting, and how are they learning, peer to peer? How are they learning on their own? How are they learning formally? That's a space that I think we definitely see growing, and we definitely see it happening more within the context of just how work happens on a day-to-day basis.
I love this phrase, digital exhaust. It may have a kind of spooky correlation about anxiety about being tracked and so on and so forth. But I know that Microsoft and the Office 365 suite, because so many people are now wired together, underneath these applications is this substrate of data that that can reveal patterns about what's going on. And I know the Microsoft team will tell you they could go in and look at your data, and of course it's all anonymized, but they can tell you which of your meetings are ineffective. And they do that by looking at the people who are in those meetings are multitasking, right? And and so they can look at these incredible patterns. Once you get to the data, there's incredible insights that you can pull from them that can really practically change how you run your organization. Now, if you apply that to learning, and I love your idea that it's not just measuring the workout you do in the gym, it's how many steps you're taking and what kind of food you're eating is all really, really kind of relevant to your physical health. And then you think about your learning activity, it's just the same. You learn by doing, you learn by sharing, you learn by presenting and talking and problem solving. Maybe the new learning technology is really all about the data that other platforms and systems can provide that reveal how knowledge is kind of flowing and being built in the organization.
Yeah, it's I think data is not yet utilized in a way in which, especially in the way we've just talked about, in its most effective form and fashion, at least to help the organization get some more of their focus back. I think if you talk to lots of different learning professionals these days, there's a constant struggle, I think, to maintain focus on where the business is going, what's happening from an operations standpoint, what's trying to keep track of where the industry is moving, trends and those kinds of things. And you're right. I mean, it's the simple data points around that can help inform a manager or our group of individuals that, look, in the last 2 weeks, you just spent 30% of your time on things that were sort of not aligned or important, and you may have not known that you were multitasking, but here's the data, and we'll be better off from being able to take decisions around that. There's a lot to still be done, I think, in that space from a data science standpoint, and the technology is all getting better, where those data sets can be better analyzed, and not by growing the additional sort of organization to help support it. It can be done by machines, and I think it's better done by machines. I'll give you one last one in the area of neuroscience. Audio visual. So, we already know about the power of storytelling and what the effect of an endless sea of bullet points can do on the probability that information is engaging and how the brain is involved in that. And, we're starting to see some new frontiers for learning experiences that are adapting beyond the browser. Go back to the conversation we started with, what's happening here in Colorado. There's a great company here in Boulder, Colorado, called Guide. It's GIIDE. And they're looking at preparing us for the next generation of learning experience where it's imagine an audio focused experience on learning in the flow of what people might recognize as a learning path or curriculum. Some really great use cases for pre-boarding, onboarding, building confidence and new skills. But it's this idea that, as we listen to certain topics and as we engage in things that are a bit different, and just like we're doing now with the podcast method, they're really reimagining that learner experience in the context of audio only, and visual where needed. So it's not. I think it's something for us to watch out for if we think about the different ways, and we better understand how the brain works through neuroscience. There's things like this that will help inform how. And it's not to say that we should go out and all of a sudden implement new technology, but we should really think about how people are learning and what engages the brain in certain ways and on certain topics. And we should know that there are companies that are thinking about this. And as learning professionals, we should take that into account and let that sort of, help guide our thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting. To go back to your sort of sports and fitness analogy, you wouldn't dream of going to the gym without sort of, making sure that you are fed properly and ready to go. Like there's a lot of tuning that we know how to do to get good physical performance out of people. It's interesting that we don't spend a lot of time on thinking through what are the conditions for people's brains to be ready to learn. And we probably use more coaching and more technology to help us understand that.
We do, and I think it will only get better, and there will be, this will be an area by which I think the consumer world will help us start to think about the productivity gains that we can have with just different modalities, different methods for learning at the right moment in time. Audio is one that we know is infiltrating our homes through smart speakers, but it's coming, I think, on the learning side of things, and it's coming in ways that I think will definitely force the learning organization to think about the skill sets that they're building from a practitioner standpoint to deliver on these new experiences. Because we've been so web focused for many years that this transition to now we need to think more about the audio components of how we produce learning, and the components by which when we teach at that level of modality, what's important. And it's a mindset change, but I think it's one that we have to be able to adapt more quickly. We have to think about, okay, what are the right teams and skills that we need to help us do that.
I like this idea of that we've been very web focused, maybe for the last 15, 20 years, because that immediately constrains you to, a particular sort of visual style and a particular kind of modality. And learning takes place in many other sort of dimensions other than just what you're reading and what you're seeing on screen. So that's a really interesting idea. Can we talk a little bit on your philosophy around experimenting with new technologies in an organization? I hear a lot of people get very anxious about security. I'm sure that's a huge issue at Visa. Sometimes it can be really complex and a monstrous effort to deploy a new technology in an organization. How do you think about experimenting and trying out technologies?
Yeah, I would say, early and often, and really make it a part of the DNA of your organizations and teams. I mean, one of the ways that I've always thought about this is pre-Visa is that the relationship with suppliers is an important one here. You really need to have a portion of your organization helping to think about where are the new trends happening, to what degree would they help solve a particular use case that's important, and beyond that, if that bet were to work out, how might it scale? I think these are the questions that need to be asked as you're building sort of a pipeline of things that might be useful to an organization. And one of the ways in which I try to categorize this, just to so you're not constantly reinforcing sort of how might these be organized, is there's typically a set of suppliers that are helping drive a learning experience, helping drive sort of how might we guide somebody to a particular learning experience. So this is these are things like learning experience platforms. These are things like coaching applications. These are things like single point web applications. So there's a whole group of things that might be helping people. You can organize them into how they guide. So kind of keep track of what's happening in that area by guide. And then you got this whole middle section, I would call it, around delivery. So these are the third-party content providers, the off-the-shelf catalogs that people are purchasing. These are things like if you build something custom on the inside, this could be your learning management system. These are all the content drivers. And then you've got the whole operational section of a theme that I would say is things that you're using to survey your people, things that you're using to drive analysis of the data, those kinds of things. And so organize, we work within your organization to organize what kinds of places that you all feel, where does your ecosystem sit today? Kind of do an inventory of where your as is, what might you need for the future to move the needle on your strategy. And there's a lot of great research out there that is already kind of doing some of the sifting for you to engage with potential suppliers. But as you do that, it'll be short-sighted just to go after supplier. Beyond making it a competitive thing, you probably should look at several and really be clear about what those use cases are that you need to help drive a particular strategy for you at the company. And then if you're successful, how might that scale with that particular partner? Because I think that's the part that folks forget is if something were to go well quickly and you do get things through security and you do kind of get the investment to implement, that scaling part will be the make or break around is this successful for the long term beyond just the 6-month pilot that we just did. But that is all to say that it's super important, I think, just to constantly be grooming this pipeline of potential suppliers and not just take into account, hey, we talked to somebody 6 months ago, they seem great. That could have all very well changed. And there's so much consolidation happening in the marketplace. You really